Patrick, thank you very much for agreeing to undertake this interview with me on your dissertation. So if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us what course you were on and give us your dissertation title. I'll just provide a very short piece of context for this, and then we'll get going with the interview questions. So over to you. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. My name is Patrick Evans. I was on the BSc Sustainable Development at UHI, and for my dissertation, the title was The Rising Tide, Investigating Perceptions and Adaptive Measures in Response to Sea Level Rise at the University of the Highlands and Islands.
Brilliant, thanks. So my name is Barry Simons. I'm the UHI Sustainability Manager. So I am one of those people responsible for making UHI as resilient as it possibly can be to climate change, to adapt to climate change and manage related risks. And Patrick's dissertation is a useful part in an evidence sense of that journey for UHI. So we'll get going on the questions now that we've introduced ourselves. So Patrick, first question. What made you choose this topic?
Yep. Okay. So having grown up on the Devonshire coastline, I've always been aware of the unforgiving nature of the sea and its potential to cause significant disruptions. And then during my time on the Sustainable Development BSc at UHI, having undertaken several modules which emphasise the vulnerabilities often witnessed by coastal and island communities, having the chance to consider the potential effects of climate change and in particular sea level rise. How could this impact the socio-economic elements at various locations across the Highlands and Islands? Proved an interesting opportunity to explore the matter further, given the various timeframes and unique challenges each location faces.
No, absolutely, and whilst it's something that's on the radar of some at the UHI partners, I think your dissertation and the interviews that you undertook help raise the bar and raise the profile of it with some key people. So thank you. So next question, Patrick, you might be aware that the UK Committee on Climate Change over the years and very recently, a couple of weeks ago, has been critical of the UK government's efforts on adaptation and resilience, and that was sort of reconfirmed in a recent report. And I'll quote from the new chair, Baroness Brown. We are seeing climate impacts happening faster and more intensely and increasing, but government just doesn't yet seem to be taking it seriously. So that's from the chair of the UK Climate Change Committee. What's your reaction to that view, that statement, Patrick?
Yeah, I would have to agree with the assessment of the situation in the statement. It just doesn't appear to be deemed a serious enough threat yet for decisive action to be implemented in tackling the issue on a scale that is relative to the possible outcomes, given the number of people and industries that will be feeling the negative effects. Now, I appreciate the difficulty in dealing with the monumental challenge of climate change, but at present, I feel that action seems to be more of a reactionary approach, despite the overwhelming evidence indicating the potential for the situation to significantly worsen in the not too distant future.
Yes, I think it's a frustrating aspect for the Committee on Climate Change, and they do pick up on action or lack of action from the devolved government sort of perspective as well. So there will be a sort of Scottish view that the committee has as well. Next question, Patrick. You interviewed estates leads mainly and other leaders at UHI Partners. What sort of picture did those members of staff in their answers paint in terms of adaptation measures currently in place across UHI?
Mm-hmm. So whilst the responses were only from one member of each site, therefore offering only a limited perspective, the overall picture highlighted a wide range of variability behind the level of adaptive measures in place and a range of differing levels of understanding and beliefs around the urgency of the topic. Some mentioned outright that they knew none were in place, and some were unsure. but those who did believe measures were in place actually cited adverse weather policies and hybrid working conditions. But ultimately, it was very apparent from the interviews that there was no uniformity across the various sites.
No, I see some of that in my role, and it's useful to have that confirmed, Patrick. So just following on, do you feel that in respect of sea level rise, specifically flooding more generally, that there is an awareness of the fuller extent of vulnerabilities as they might apply to UHI, or does awareness sort of coalesce around certain areas or other vulnerabilities?
From participants' responses in general, themes suggested a belief that the potential areas of vulnerability were around transportation restrictions, supply chain disruptions, and the threat of technical communication breakdown. For the campus buildings themselves, though, very few believed that they currently faced a high level of risk. Generally, weather events were frequently mentioned by the majority, and its ability to worsen the negative effects associated with sea level rise and surface water flooding. And those who already have suffered at the hands of flooding in the local area caused by this were seemingly more aware of the overall threat it posed, and were already conscious of their current vulnerabilities and inability to instigate measures to prevent further damaging effects.
Yeah, I think there's possibly a trick we have to play somehow in using those staff that are more active and are more aware to help inform others in a sort of peer-to-peer sense. So no thanks for that. You mentioned Scotland's world-leading legislation on climate change in your dissertation, including public bodies' duties, which other parts of the UK don't have. Do you think that in Scotland this is having the desired effect?
I think it's a step in the right direction, and it has definitely allowed positive conversations to be had and greater focus to be given to the issue. But more could be done, and the systems that are in place could see regular and should see regular evaluation as to their suitability and effectiveness. From interviewees' responses, a few did mention their frustration with the current requirements behind reporting, and they seemingly felt that it was time-consuming and extraneous, and that they offered minimal means in the terms of actual progressive developments in general.
No, that kind of confirms what I get a sense of, and I mean, it may be the case that the consultation on the statutory guidance, which is open and live at the moment, might eventually, change things to give things more status, introduce more sort of oversight and scrutiny. We'll have to wait and see. So did you get a next question? Did you get a sense from the staff that you interviewed at a partner level of why adaptation measures and other climate changes haven't started, or they started and they stalled?
So whilst 80% felt that sea level rise posed some level of risk to their campus and its overall operations, a reoccurring theme that was prevalent throughout was that sea level rise was largely believed to only offer a low level of risk. However, those who did believe it did pose a greater risk mentioned financial restrictions and delays on external funding as the main causes of the lack of adaptive measures being instigated on their sites at present. Additionally, some stated that they were not eligible for the available grants, and that the overall high cost of implementation required were generally insurmountable challenge and for further inaction, and it was just not possible for them to achieve what they felt was needed because of this.
Yes, it's frustrating, and I think that's been the case for some time, and it will be frustrating, I think, from the perspective of the people that you interviewed as well. I get a sense of that. So yeah, I think you've already answered this question to some extent. So do staff want to do more?
Yeah, given the level of variability behind the interviewees' beliefs on the matter, some did feel that more adaptive measures were needed, specifically in response to sea level rise. But some did believe that it would need to offer a more pronounced and immediate threat before adaptive measures would and should be implemented.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that immediacy, it sort of takes you into almost sort of reactive costs and reactive change, which we're hoping to move the dial on, future-proof and horizon scan in the first place, and future-proof if we can through various measures.
Yep.
Next question. When it comes to responsibility then for implementing adapted measures, UHI partners and UHI as a whole scored highly, 87%. I think you'll confirm that. On that basis, why do you think so little has been done? You've touched on a few things, but why do you think so little has been done?
Yeah, I think as previously alluded to, the level of risk in relation to sea level rise is largely deemed as low by many, and that its effects can take several years to manifest or require the impacts of several disruption events to accumulate for it to become sort of more aware, people to become more aware. An action to address this issue, as well as a wide range of individual perspectives on the issue, to some degree have potentially stymied adaptive action. Also, furthermore, due to the unique set of challenges faced by each different UHI partner in relation to adapting to the various issues caused by climate change, no one-size-all-fit policy can sort of help achieve this and address the challenges yet to come. So I guess further research into the area could help provide a range of suitable options are considered in adaptive planning, and to help focus development agendas a bit more. But obviously with the coastal areas, regional councils do have a large say, if not the biggest say, in what's actually being done and achieved in this area. So that can be quite limiting in itself.
No, I think there's a strong case you make there for UHI to be working more closely, smarter, better with other key players like councils. Yeah, so sort of following on from that, and looking back into your dissertation and the responses and the analysis that you undertook, there's low confidence that governments, agencies, national or regional, local, UHI itself even, have measures in place to mitigate sea level rise. So I think you've answered this in part, but this is a question more in that sort of partnership sphere and sense. So what do you think has inhibited staff and managers from taking action themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as you rightly say, the links previously back into it, but I think the actual measures that are needed to be implemented at times are beyond the capacity of any one single organisation and individual. So greater cooperation between all relevant stakeholders in sharing knowledge, experience in dealing with sea level rise, as we've previously mentioned, and an overall greater responsibility on the collective implementation of adaptive measures could be beneficial. And again, greater cooperation could enable the pooling of funds, for example, and ensure sufficient measures are in place, whilst preventing maladaptation or the general failure to prepare for future outcomes and events.
No, thanks. I've got a similar question, which I think you've answered, sort of frames it in a slightly different way. Question 10, Patrick. Mm-hmm. So I'll move on to question 11. So from your interviews, are there any opportunities that were spoken about or alluded to being taken by staff to future-proof things, upgrade specifications or standards, for example, of things like drains or gutter capacity, roofs, building design, those sort of things, for example?
Yeah, I think, well, when drains and gutters and roofs and building designs were actually mentioned in the interviews, future proofing was not so much an element in the response. It was more trying to keep up with failings that were already happening at present. The previous requirements either have already sort of failed to deal with elevated levels of rainfall, of fluvial flooding, of the accumulation of the sea level rises with high tides, etc., in the local area. And several were aware that the building renovations that were required were beyond the financial capacities to actually enact the changes that were needed. And in particular, the low-lying campuses that were situated on the coast that had already experienced flooding seem to have been the partners who were more attuned and experienced in these matters. And as you rightly state, the sharing of this knowledge is only, well, it could only be more beneficial across the area. But it did seem there was a desire for many to future-proof and upgrade, as it were, but were unable to do so.
Yes, we touched on it before. I'm sure for that staff at those academic partners who do experience this, it is a frustration, and has been for some time, and hopefully that picture will shift and change, and more funding will be made available from whatever source and route to facilitate and enable more adaptive measures, hopefully. So just moving on to question 12, a final question. You'll be pleased to hear. So, what is your view on how adaptation to sea level rise, climate resilience, more generally, is prioritised? Are things changing, Patrick?
I think given the overall uncertainty behind the factors that contribute towards future sea level rise in particular, and contemporary society's general lack of ambition to tackle climate change or actually instigate progressive action, although the risk posed by sea level rise is somewhat uncertain, and at times the evidence can be unclear, as the Earth's natural cycles have shown, sea levels will rise, and it's just a matter of when and by how much. I believe that climate resilience is becoming more of a pressing concern throughout society, and greater funding is obviously being allocated. But realistically, until it becomes a more pronounced problem for people's lives and begins to cause more significant disruptions, particularly in the UK, climate adaptation funding will continue to be limited, and it may only arrive once it's too late, if it even arrives at all.
No, thank you for that answer, and it's incumbent on myself and others, using resources like your dissertation and your experience and feedback and the academic and research and student expertise and resource within UHI, just in a better way, not just on adaptation and climate resilience, climate risks, but right across the sustainability agenda. So your dissertation may be unique in that UHI was both the subject and the beneficiary. And from my perspective, I want to try and contrive things so that we see more of that. So just finally from me, Patrick, just my appreciation for what you've done and how much you've helped me, and I'll endeavour to use your dissertation as much and as fully as I can to alter and change things in a positive way around climate change adaptation and adapting to sea level rise. And I'll leave the last word to you, but just to reiterate my appreciation and thanks, and to wish you the best of luck in your future career and any further studies that you might make, Patrick. But I'll leave the last word to you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's been a great opportunity. You've been a great help, and it's a really interesting topic, very contemporary topic. It's obviously going to prove more and more of a concern in the future, and it was a great opportunity. And no, enjoyed every aspect of it. And no, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Patrick.